ever since the Egyptian military ousted President Mohamed Morsi from power last month, members of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood have gone from kingmakers to targets. And today, Egyptians woke up to learn the group's most significant member, its spiritual leader, was arrested and charged with inciting murder, as images of Mohamed Badie in custody appeared on television. 3 of the Brotherhood's top leaders are now locked up, along with Mohamed Morsi himself, whose detention was just extended for another 2 weeks. It all appears to be a concerted government effort to decapitate the group. Egypt has seen more violence this past week than ever in recent history. Nearly 1,000 are dead after security forces cracked down on Morsi supporters, and some observers say it is reminiscent of the Mubarak days, except possibly even worse. Meanwhile, Mubarak himself may soon see freedom. His lawyer says he could be released by the end of this week. But a main advisor to the new Egyptian presidency, Mostafa Hegazi, tells me that the road to democracy is still on course and that the world simply doesn't have the full picture of what's really going on. He joined me earlier from Cairo. All right, Mr. Mostafa Hegazi, thanks for being with us. The news today is the arrest of the Muslim Brotherhood spiritual leader, Mohamed Badie. Do you consider this a victory for the interim leaders?
I think in any country in the world, if you find the ones behind the instigations, that they came to the point that they're now in custody for the proper, I would say, trials, I think this would be, I wouldn't say just a victory from a vindictive standpoint, but it's from the standpoint that we're restoring law and order in a country which has its own sovereign rights.
Just a few weeks ago, a Muslim Brotherhood-backed president was in power, the first democratically elected leader for the country, and now you have an interim leadership, parading Muslim Brotherhood leaders on television, arrested. I mean, how is this good for reconciliation, and was there no other way to go about things?
I think we have to always, again, to see the bigger picture, we have to see the context of things. Because if you look at what you just mentioned as to be a democratically elected government or a democratically elected regime, you have to get back in time to the 21st of November 2012, when the ousted president and his group and his militias has been terrorizing Egyptian, I would say, at least emotionally, by just having a constitutional declaration that he kind of confiscated the judicial system in Egypt. Maybe it's a bit of creative democracy that hasn't been seen, but because we didn't have a process of impeaching the president through a parliament, we had to do it the way that we've done it.
But does this creative democracy involve the beating of protesters? You had over the weekend 36, I believe, prisoners in a transfer killed. One of them was Sharif Sayem. He was featured in a story by my colleague Nick Payne-Walsh. We saw activist video of him getting kicked in the face by police as he was being detained. Is this the new Egypt, or is this the old Egypt of Mubarak days that we're seeing once again?
The whole context of what you're referring to as peaceful protesters, I can have this definition referred to in the Gandhi time or Martin Luther King kind of nonviolent protests. But if you had in the streets of Cairo, you have barricades in the middle of the streets of Cairo, and you have spots, the so-called Rabaa and Nahda, having people going out of that, of the 2 spots, having, I would say, random machine gun killing for Egyptians in the heart of Cairo, going out and beating people up. I would say that before any kind of dispersal of the 2 so-called sit-ins. Killing and stabbing young ladies in the streets of Cairo.
I need to jump in because we saw more than 1,000 deaths. Some of my colleagues in Cairo have had their cameras confiscated, have been forced to delete some of the material in their cameras.
Yeah, but
it just feels a lot like the old days. That's all I'm saying.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's what I'm conferring to you, because there's many missing stories that, Egyptians are having, a kind of astonishment that probably CNN and maybe other media coverages are not seeing. I mean, we haven't seen enough media coverage for maybe burning of churches. We haven't been seeing anything about the killing and mutilation of our men in uniform.
As much as we know, we're having an investigation,
a very clear investigation about. But let me finish. Let me finish, please, Let me finish, please. I mean, as much as you just mentioned the 36 prisoners, that we're having an investigation with a public prosecutor taking care of it, You haven't seen, or you haven't just mentioned 27 of our soldiers that has been, I would say, killed in cold blood, handcuffed in one of, of the worst war crimes that, I think humanity would have ever seen. There is a huge link of terrorist attacks that we're having in Sinai, and if you ask the definition of what's happening in Sinai in the U.S., the U.S. media, the U.S. government circles, you would have the proper definition that I'm getting, which are acts of terror. We're having a war of terrorism against the Egyptian people and the Egyptian state. If this context is not clear, I think most of other conclusions drawn would be way misleading. And I think let's first come to that, I would say, level of having proper and common definitions of violence and non-violence, of peaceful protesters, of peaceful marches and protesters that has been having machine gunners amidst of them, sniping people randomly off the top of one of the bridges in the heart of Cairo last Friday.
I get your point, Mr. Hegazi, on
stories
this
that I haven't seen on CNN as well.
No, it has been on CNN. We actually have a whole story today about injured and wounded police officers. But I want to ask you about one other thing. Do you promise the Egyptian people that the state of emergency will last only 1 month and that there will be elections in the coming months for them?
I can confirm to you one thing. We're having a presidential statement today, which we're confirming that the first stage of our roadmap to the future has been completed, and we're having a constitution in I would say 60 days or maybe a bit less or a bit more from today. The moment that we have our constitution and the referendum is cleared, we will be calling for parliamentary elections in less than 15 days from that day. Once we have a parliament in about 2 months from that date, we'll be calling for presidential elections.
Thank you very much. Mustafa Hegazi, the advisor to Egypt's interim presidency and government, thank you for joining us on CNN today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Hal. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
As the